The night watch was drawing to its end, and the watchman stood at his post in the stone tower as he had stood 1,000 times before, his hands resting on the cold parapet, his breath visible in the air before him, dissipating slowly into the darkness that was not quite darkness anymore, but something softer, something giving way. The stones beneath his palms were rough and familiar, worn smooth in places where generations of hands had rested, and he could feel the cold seeping through his woolen gloves, a cold that was constant and grounding, a cold that told him he was here, present, doing what needed to be done. Below him, the village lay quiet under a blanket of fog that had crept in during the deepest part of the night, fog that clung to the ground and softened every edge, every corner, every line of the rooftops, until the whole world seemed made of something gentler than wood and stone, something more like memory or dream. He could see the shapes of the houses, darker masses rising from the pale gray mist, their thatched roofs sloping down like the backs of sleeping animals, and here and there a chimney stood silent, waiting for the day to begin, waiting for the first fire to be kindled, the first thread of smoke to rise. The air was still, or nearly still, with only the slightest movement of wind, a breath more than a breeze, carrying with it the scent of damp earth and the promise of morning, and the watchman breathed it in slowly, feeling it fill his lungs, cool and clean. He had been standing here since the bells had rung for Compline, since the last of the villagers had closed their doors and shuttered their windows, since the world had settled into its nightly silence, and his legs were stiff now, his back aching in the way that came from hours of standing, but it was a familiar ache, one he knew well, one that told him his watch was nearly done. He shifted his weight from one foot to the other, slowly, careful not to disturb the quiet that surrounded him, and he listened. There was so much to hear in the silence, if you knew how to listen. The wind moved through the bare branches of the trees beyond the village walls, a sound like water running over stones, soft and continuous, and somehow soothing. Somewhere in the distance, far away, a dog barked once, twice, then fell silent again, and the silence returned, deeper than before. The fog seemed to absorb sound, to hold it gently and let it fade without echo, and the watchman was grateful for this, for the way the night wrapped itself around him and the village both, protective and calm. His cloak hung heavy on his shoulders, the weight of it familiar and reassuring, the wool thick and slightly damp from the fog, and beneath it he wore a quilted gambeson that had seen many years of use, the fabric worn soft in places, patched in others, but still warm, still serviceable. He was not a young man anymore, though he was not old either, somewhere in that middle stretch of life where the body knows its work and does it without complaint, where routine becomes a kind of comfort, a rhythm you can rely on. He had been standing watch in this tower for more years than he could easily count, and he knew every stone of it, every step of the spiral staircase that wound up through its center, every crack in the mortar, every place where the wind whistled through on stormy nights. But tonight was not a stormy night. Tonight was quiet, peaceable, the kind of night that made his work feel less like duty and more like simply being present, bearing witness to the slow turning of the hours, the gradual movement from darkness toward light. He looked out over the village again, his eyes tracing the familiar shapes, the lane that wound between the houses, the well in the square, the church with its modest bell tower rising just slightly higher than the surrounding roofs. Everything was in its place, everything as it should be, and this knowledge settled something deep in his chest, a quiet satisfaction that needed no words. The fog was beginning to thin in places, he noticed. Not lifting, but shifting, moving in slow currents like water in a still pond when something stirs beneath the surface. Through the thinning patches he could see more detail now, the shape of a cart left beside a house, the posts of a fence, the low wall that marked the boundary of the baker's yard. Soon the baker would wake, would begin his work, and the smell of bread would drift through the village, but for now everything slept, and the watchman kept his vigil, patient and unhurried. He had learned patience over the years, learned it in this tower, in these long, quiet hours between midnight and dawn when nothing happened and nothing needed to happen, when his only task was to watch and wait and be ready, though ready for what he could not always say. There had been years, decades even, since anything had truly threatened this village, and he was glad of that, deeply glad, for he had no love of conflict, no desire for the kind of excitement that came with danger. What he loved, if he could call it love, was this: the steadiness, the reliability, the knowledge that his presence here meant something, even if that something was as simple and profound as being awake while others slept. A bell rang in the distance, soft and clear, the sound carrying across the fog-wrapped fields from another village perhaps 2 miles away, and he listened to it fade, the sound dissolving into the air like sugar into water, present and then gone, leaving only the memory of itself. He had heard that bell many times before, ringing the hours through the night, a companion of sorts, another watchman's signal that the world was turning as it should, that time was passing in its proper way. Soon his own village bell would ring, the small iron bell that hung in the church tower, and when it did, he would know that his watch was truly ending, that he could descend the stairs and make his way home. But he was in no hurry. These last hours of the watch were often the quietest, the most peaceful, and he had learned to savor them. The cold was deeper now, the cold that came just before dawn, and he could feel it in his fingers despite his gloves, in his toes despite his sturdy boots. But it was not an unpleasant cold, not the biting cold of winter nor the damp chill of autumn rain. It was simply the cold of a spring night giving way to a spring morning, clean and sharp and somehow honest, and he accepted it as he accepted everything else about his work, as part of the whole, as necessary and right. He thought of his wife, asleep in their small house at the edge of the village, wrapped in blankets, her face peaceful in sleep, and he hoped she was warm, hoped she was dreaming pleasant dreams. He would return to her soon, would slip quietly through the door and remove his boots in the entryway, would hang his cloak on its peg and warm his hands over the embers of the fire before climbing into bed beside her for a few hours of rest. She understood his work, had understood it from the beginning, had never complained about the hours he kept, the nights he spent away, and for this he was grateful, more grateful than he could easily express. The sky was changing now, imperceptibly at first, but then more clearly, the black of full night giving way to something softer, a deep blue that was almost purple, the color of a bruise or a plum, and in that color he could sense the approach of dawn, still distant but inevitable, as sure as breathing. He had seen this transition countless times, had watched the sky lighten from this very spot so many mornings that they blurred together in his memory, but each one was also somehow unique, each one worth witnessing, worth standing here in the cold to see. Birds were beginning to stir now. He could hear them, small rustlings in the thatch of the roofs below, the soft chirp of a sparrow waking, testing its voice against the silence. Soon there would be more, a whole chorus of them, but for now it was just these few early risers, these bold ones who could not wait for full daylight, and he smiled slightly at the sound of them, at their eagerness to greet the day that was not quite day yet. The fog lay thick in the fields beyond the village, a sea of white and gray that obscured the ground completely, making it seem as though the village itself was an island, a small collection of roofs and walls rising from an ocean of cloud. He could not see the road that led to the next village, could not see the stream that ran along the western edge of the fields, could not see the forest that began half a mile to the north, but he knew they were there, knew the landscape as well as he knew his own hands, and the fog did not trouble him. It would burn off when the sun rose higher, would evaporate into the morning air, and the world would reveal itself again, solid and familiar. He stretched his arms slowly, carefully, feeling the stiffness in his shoulders, and he rolled his neck from side to side, hearing the small pops and cracks that came with hours of standing still. His body was tired, he could feel that clearly now, but it was a good tiredness, an honest one, the tiredness that came from work done well, from duty fulfilled. He would sleep deeply when he finally lay down, would sleep the sleep of someone who had earned their rest, and he looked forward to that, to the heavy warmth of blankets, to the softness of his pillow, to the quiet presence of his wife beside him. The village below him was beginning to show more clearly now as the light grew, and he could make out individual details that had been hidden before. The bench outside the tavern, the water trough beside the blacksmith's forge, the flowers planted in a window box on the merchant's house. Everything was damp with dew and fog, everything glistening slightly in the growing light, and there was something beautiful about it, something that made his chest feel full in a way he did not entirely understand, but did not need to understand either. He had lived in this village all his life, had been born in a house not far from where he now stood, had played as a child in these very streets, had learned his trade and married his wife and raised his children here. And though he had traveled sometimes, had been to the market towns and once even to the cathedral city 2 days' journey to the south, he had always been glad to return, always felt that this was where he belonged, that these stones and these people and this particular piece of earth were his in some deep way that had nothing to do with ownership and everything to do with belonging. The fog was definitely thinning now, pulling back from the village like a tide receding, and he could see farther into the fields, could make out the shapes of the apple trees in the orchard, their branches still bare but swelling with the buds that would become blossoms in another week or two, and beyond them the gentle rise of the hill where sheep grazed in warmer weather. Everything was waking slowly, reluctantly, like a sleeper who knows they must rise but wants just a few more moments of rest. And the watchman felt a kinship with this reluctance, this gentle resistance to the inevitable coming of day. A door opened somewhere below. He heard it clearly, the creak of hinges and the soft thud of wood against wood, and he knew without looking that it was the baker, beginning his day as he always did, in darkness, in silence, making his way to his ovens to start the fires that would heat them for baking. The watchman had seen him countless times over the years, a small figure moving through the pre-dawn streets with his lamp, and he felt a fondness for the man, for his dedication, for the way he too served the village in his own way, providing bread, providing sustenance, providing the smell that would soon fill the air and tell everyone that morning had truly arrived. The light was growing steadily now, no longer the deep blue purple of early dawn, but something paler, something approaching gray, and with it came a slight increase in the wind, a gentle stirring of air that moved across his face and ruffled the edge of his cloak. He welcomed it, this movement, this sign of change, and he breathed deeply again, drawing the morning air into his lungs, feeling it fill him and sustain him for these last moments of his watch. He thought about duty, about what it meant to stand here night after night, year after year, watching over a village that rarely needed watching, protecting people who might never know his name. And he found that he had no regrets about it, no sense that his time had been wasted or his life spent on something meaningless. On the contrary, there was a rightness to it, a fittingness that satisfied something deep in his nature, something that needed to give, to serve, to be useful in this quiet, unglamorous way. He was not a hero, would never be one, had never wanted to be one, but he was a watchman, and that was enough, more than enough. More birds now, their songs overlapping, creating a tapestry of sound that was complex and beautiful, and somehow peaceful despite its growing volume. He recognized many of them by their calls: the robin with its cheerful warble, the blackbird with its melodious whistle, the finches with their high, bright notes. They were singing to claim territory, to attract mates, to announce their presence to the world. But to him, their songs were simply part of the morning, part of the daily renewal that happened whether anyone was watching or not, and he was glad to be here to witness it. Glad to be awake and present for this transition from night to day. The sky was definitely lighter now, a pale gray that held within it the promise of blue, and he could see the horizon clearly for the first time, the line where the fields met the sky, soft and indistinct but present, real. The fog was mostly gone from the village itself now, though it still lay thick in the low-lying areas, in the hollows and the stream bed, and it would linger there for another hour or more, burning off slowly as the sun climbed higher. But that was for others to see. His watch was ending, his night was done, and he felt a quiet gladness about this, a readiness to rest. He made a slow circuit of the tower's top, walking around the narrow walkway that ran along the inside of the parapet, checking each direction, as he always did at the end of his watch, looking north, east, south, west, seeing nothing but peace, nothing but the familiar landscape waking slowly to another day. To the north, the forest was a dark smudge against the lighter sky. To the east, the road wound away toward distant places he would likely never see. To the south, the fields spread out in their careful patterns of plowed earth and pasture, and to the west, the sun would soon rise, though it had not yet appeared above the horizon. His hands were stiff from the cold, and he flexed his fingers slowly, working warmth back into them. And he thought about the hot porridge his wife would make for him when he got home, the way she would ladle it into a bowl and hand it to him with a smile, the way the heat of it would spread through him and ease the chill from his bones. He thought about sitting at their small table, about eating slowly, about telling her in a few quiet words about the night just past, though there would be little to tell, as there usually was, just the peaceful passage of hours, the keeping of watch, the slow turn of the world through darkness toward light. The church bell rang then, clear and sweet, the sound cutting through the morning air and announcing the hour, and he counted the strokes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 bells. The hour when the night watch ended and the day watch began. Though there was rarely need for a day watch, for the village took care of itself in daylight, everyone about their business, everyone watching over each other in the natural way of communities that had lived together for generations. He waited for the last echo of the bell to fade, standing perfectly still, honoring this moment of transition, this threshold between one part of the day and the next. Then he moved, slowly and deliberately, toward the door that led to the stairway, his hand reaching for the iron handle that was cold against his palm even through his glove. He pulled the door open, and the hinges creaked softly, a sound he knew as well as he knew his own voice, and he stepped into the darkness of the stairwell, pausing to let his eyes adjust, to find his footing on the first of the stone steps that spiraled down through the tower's heart. The stairs were narrow and worn smooth by centuries of use, and he descended them carefully, one hand on the wall to guide him, feeling his way down through the darkness. There were no windows in the stairwell, no light except what came from above and below, and he moved by feel and memory, his body knowing each step, each turn, each place where the stairs were particularly steep, where the ceiling particularly low. It was a meditative descent, requiring attention but not thought, and his mind was free to wander, to think about nothing in particular, to simply be present with the sound of his own footsteps and the rough stone under his hand. He emerged at the bottom into a small chamber where a lamp burned low, left there by the previous watch, and he took a moment to trim the wick and add oil before extinguishing it completely. The dawn light was coming through the narrow window now, enough to see by, and he moved to the door that opened onto the village street, unbarring it and pulling it open to let in the fresh morning air. The village was still quiet, though not silent anymore, and he could hear the sounds of waking, a rooster crowing from someone's yard, the creak of a well bucket being drawn up, the murmur of voices from the baker's house. Smoke was beginning to rise from a few chimneys now, thin threads of gray against the lightening sky, and he watched them for a moment, finding something soothing in their slow upward drift, their gentle dispersal into the air. He stepped out into the street and closed the door behind him, and he stood for a moment, feeling the slight warmth of the stones beneath his feet, stones that had absorbed the day's heat and were slowly releasing it into the cool morning air. The day watch would arrive soon, a younger man who would spend the daylight hours in the tower, not because there was any real need for it, but because it was tradition, because it was right to maintain the watch, to show the village that someone was always paying attention, always ready, always present. He began to walk toward his home, moving slowly, in no hurry, letting his body adjust to movement after so many hours of standing still. His legs were stiff at first, but loosened with each step, and he found his rhythm, the pace that would carry him through the village streets without effort, without thought. He passed the church and touched his forehead in a small gesture of respect, not quite a prayer, but an acknowledgement of something larger than himself, something that deserved recognition. The baker's wife was sweeping the step outside their house, and she looked up as he passed, nodding to him with a small smile, and he nodded back, the silent greeting of people who knew each other well enough not to need words. She understood where he had been, what he had been doing, and her nod was one of acknowledgement and perhaps gratitude, though neither of them would have named it that. The sky was definitely brightening now, the gray taking on a warmer tone, and he knew that within the hour the sun would break above the horizon, flooding the village with life, burning away the last of the fog, beginning the day in earnest. But he would not see it, not today, for he would be home by then, would be sleeping in his bed, would be giving himself over to the rest he had earned through the long hours of the night. His house came into view, small and familiar, with its thatched roof and whitewashed walls, and he felt a warmth in his chest at the sight of it, a gladness that went beyond words. Smoke was rising from the chimney, which meant his wife was awake, had stirred the fire to life, was perhaps already preparing breakfast, and he quickened his pace slightly, eager now to be inside, to be warm, to be home. He pushed open the door and stepped into the small front room, and the warmth of the fire hit him immediately, a wave of heat that was almost overwhelming after the cold of the tower, and he closed his eyes for a moment, just breathing, just feeling it wash over him. His wife appeared in the doorway to the kitchen, a small woman with graying hair and kind eyes, and she smiled at him, that smile that had greeted him at the end of 1,000 watches, and he smiled back, tired but content. "All well?" she asked softly, and he nodded, knowing she would ask, knowing the answer was always the same, but knowing too that she needed to hear it, needed the confirmation that the night had passed peacefully, that he had returned safely. "All well," he said, his voice rough from disuse, from hours of silence, and he moved to the fire, holding his hands out to the flames, feeling the heat begin to work its way into his cold fingers. She disappeared back into the kitchen, and he heard the sounds of her work, the scrape of a spoon against a pot, the clink of bowls being set out, and he let his eyes close again, let himself simply stand there, warming himself, feeling the tiredness in his bones, the pleasant heaviness that came before sleep. She brought him porridge in a wooden bowl, and he sat at the table and ate slowly, methodically, tasting the honey she had stirred into it, tasting the comfort of it, the simple goodness of hot food after a cold night. She sat across from him with her own bowl, and they ate in companionable silence, not needing to talk, just being together in the warm quiet of their home as the village woke around them. When he was finished, he set the bowl aside and stood, and she stood with him, and they moved together toward the bedroom, a small room at the back of the house with a low ceiling and a narrow window. The bed was made up with clean linens, and he could see that she had warmed it with stones from the fire, had prepared it for him as she always did, and he felt a surge of love for her, for this care, for this quiet tending that was her way of watching over him as he watched over the village. He removed his cloak and his gambeson, his boots and his belt, and he hung them on the pegs along the wall where they always hung, and then he climbed into the bed, pulling the blankets up over himself, feeling their weight, their warmth, their softness. His wife moved around the room, tidying things, drawing the curtain across the window to block out the growing light, and then she came to the bed and sat beside him for a moment, her hand on his shoulder, a gentle pressure that said everything that needed saying. "Sleep well," she whispered, and he nodded, already feeling himself drifting, already feeling the pull of sleep, strong and irresistible. She rose and left the room, closing the door softly behind her, and he was alone in the warm darkness, alone with his tiredness, alone with the satisfaction of a watch completed, a duty fulfilled. He thought about the village, still there, still waking, still going about its business, safe and peaceful under the brightening sky. He thought about the tower, standing silent now with the day watch in place, the same stones, the same view, the same patient vigil. He thought about the fog in the fields burning away, revealing the land beneath, and he thought about the birds singing, the baker baking, the world turning as it always turned, reliable and steady and good. His breathing slowed, deepened, and he felt himself sinking into the bed, felt the tiredness in his muscles beginning to ease, felt his mind growing quiet, letting go of thought, letting go of watching, letting go of everything except the simple pleasure of rest. The sounds of the village were distant now, muffled by the walls, by the curtain, by the soft barrier between waking and sleeping, and he welcomed this distance, this separation, this time that was his own, time to rest, time to recover, time to prepare for the next watch, the next night, the next turning of the hours from darkness into light. He had done his work, had stood his watch, had kept the village safe through another night, and now he could rest, could let others take up the day's responsibilities while he slept, while he restored himself, while he prepared to do it all again. There was something deeply satisfying about this rhythm, this alternation between watching and resting, between giving and receiving, between effort and ease, and he settled into it now with the gratitude of someone who had found their place, their purpose, their way of being in the world. The last thing he was aware of before sleep took him completely was the warmth of the bed, the softness of the pillow, the sound of his own breathing, slow and steady, and the knowledge, deep and certain, that all was well, that the village was safe, that he had done what needed doing, and that he could rest now, could let go, could surrender to the peaceful darkness that was not the darkness of night, but the darkness of sleep, restorative and kind.
And so he slept, the watchman in his bed, as the morning grew bright outside his window, as the sun climbed higher in the sky, as the village went about its daily life, all of it continuing, all of it safe, all of it held in the same gentle rhythm that had sustained it for generations and would sustain it for generations more. The endless turning of day into night and night into day. The endless cycle of watching and resting, of duty and peace, of giving and receiving, all of it part of the same great pattern, the same quiet dance, the same ancient and reliable way of being that asked nothing more than presence, than attention, than the willingness to stand watch, to be there, to bear witness to the slow and beautiful unfolding of ordinary time. The village continued its waking, but the watchman slept on, deeply and peacefully, his work done, his duty fulfilled, his rest earned and given freely by a world that recognized his service, that held him gently, that allowed him this time of restoration before he would wake again, before he would rise again, before he would climb the tower stairs again and take up his post again, watching over the village as it settled into another night, another cycle, another turning of the wheel that moved them all forward, together, through time. And in his sleep, if he dreamed of simple things, of fog and fields, of bells ringing softly across distance, of the cold stone of the parapet beneath his hands, of the slow lightening of the sky, of birds beginning to sing, of all the small and quiet moments that made up a watch, a night, a life spent in service to others, in protection of peace, in the keeping of vigil over all that was dear and familiar and worth preserving. He dreamed of the village sleeping safely below him, of rooftops and chimneys and narrow streets, of people resting in their beds, secure in the knowledge that someone was watching, someone was present, someone was paying attention while they surrendered to sleep.
And the village, for its part, went about its business, baking bread, drawing water, tending animals, mending fences, teaching children, all of it happening in the ordinary way of ordinary days, with no fanfare, no drama, no recognition of the watch that had just ended or the watchman who slept now in his small house at the village edge. But perhaps, in some deep and unspoken way, the village knew, understood, carried within its collective consciousness and awareness of this protection, this vigilance, this care that required no thanks because it was given freely, because it was part of the fabric of community, the invisible threads that held them all together and made them something more than just individuals living side by side. The sun climbed higher, the day grew warmer, and the watchman slept on, his breathing deep and regular, his body still, his mind at rest. The world outside his window was busy and bright, full of movement and sound and activity, but inside the darkened room there was only peace, only quiet, only the gentle respite of earned sleep. And this too was part of the pattern, part of the rhythm, part of the way things were meant to be. Hours passed. The sun reached its zenith and began its slow descent toward the western horizon, and still the watchman slept, his body taking what it needed, his mind wandering through dreams that left no trace upon waking, his spirit renewing itself in the deep well of rest that is every person's birthright and every worker's reward. His wife moved quietly through the house, respecting his sleep, tending to her own tasks, occasionally pausing to look in on him, to adjust a blanket that had slipped, to smile at the sight of him, peaceful and still before returning to her work.
And when he finally woke, as the afternoon was aging toward evening, as the light was taking on that particular golden quality that speaks of day's end approaching, he woke slowly, gently, without alarm or urgency, his eyes opening to the familiar darkness of the curtained room, his mind clear and calm, his body rested and restored. He lay there for a long moment, not quite ready to move, just being present with the sensation of waking, with the comfort of the bed, with the knowledge that he had slept well and deeply, and that the day had continued without him, as it should, as it must. Eventually he rose, moving carefully in the dimness, finding his clothes, dressing himself, and then drawing back the curtain to let in the afternoon light. The world outside was golden and beautiful, the village bathed in warm sunlight, everything looking peaceful and prosperous and good. And he stood at the window for a moment, just looking, just taking it in, feeling grateful for this place, for this life, for the simple and profound privilege of being here, of having work to do, of having people to watch over, of having a purpose that, while humble, was also essential and right. He would eat something, he decided, and then he would spend a few hours with his wife, helping her with whatever needed doing, talking with her about small things, enjoying her company before it was time to prepare for another watch. The tower would be waiting for him when darkness fell, the stones would be there, the view would be the same, and he would climb the stairs once more and take up his position once more and watch over the village once more as it settled into sleep, as it surrendered to the night, trusting that someone was there, that someone was paying attention, that someone cared enough to stand through the cold and the dark and the silent hours, keeping watch, keeping faith, keeping the village safe. This was his life, and it was a good life, a life of service and routine and quiet satisfaction. And as he left the bedroom and went to find his wife, to greet her, to thank her for the meal she would have ready, for the warmth she maintained, for the home they had built together, he felt at peace with it all, at peace with himself, at peace with the endless cycle of watching and sleeping, of duty and rest, of giving and receiving that made up the days and nights and years of his time on this earth. The evening would come, as it always did, and with it the night. And with the night, his watch would begin again, and he would be ready for it, would welcome it even, for it was his to keep, his to honor,
his to fulfill, and there was no other place he would rather be, no other work he would rather do than this, standing in the tower above the village, watching over those who slept, bearing witness to the quiet miracle of another night, another dawn, another day given freely to all who called this place home. And so the pattern continued, would continue. The watchman sleeping while the village woke, the village sleeping while the watchman watched, each supporting the other, each making possible the other's peace, each part of the greater whole that was community, that was home, that was the life they had all chosen or inherited or simply found themselves living together in this particular place at this particular time, under the same sky, breathing the same air, sharing the same rhythms of work and rest, of waking and sleeping, of watching and being watched over, all of it flowing together like water in a stream, natural and necessary and endlessly sustaining. The day faded toward evening. The light grew softer and more golden, and somewhere in the village the bells began to ring again, marking the hours, calling people to prayer or to table, or simply reminding them of time's passage. And the watchman heard them and smiled, knowing that soon he would climb the tower stairs again, would take up his post again, would stand through another night in service to the village he loved, the people he protected, the life he had chosen and that had chosen him in return. This was enough, more than enough. And as the sun sank lower and the shadows grew longer, and the first star appeared in the darkening sky, the watchman prepared himself once more, gathered his cloak and his resolve, kissed his wife goodbye, and stepped out into the gathering dusk, walking slowly but steadily toward the tower, toward the watch, toward the night that awaited him, peaceful and patient and ready to be kept, ready to be honored, ready to be witnessed by one who understood its value, its beauty, its quiet and essential place in the turning of the world from light to darkness and back to light again, forever and ever, without end.